and I are here every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern on the Fancred app, or you might be watching us live streaming at fancredsports.com/on-air. There's so many ways you could be watching us right now. Each week we're bringing you the latest Major League Baseball news, but we talk about a whole other slew of topics as well on here. Here's how it works. If you're on the app right now, you can ask us some questions live. You need to be on the Fancred app. You hit the fan line button. It's in the top right. You'll go into a green screen room. You'll talk to our producer, Cam, and then you can come on and ask John and I whatever question you may have. It doesn't have to be just baseball related. You can also put any questions that you have in the comment section, and we'll get to as many as we can, but we have a loaded show today. So we're going to start. Things that we're talking about today is which free agent is going to win this offseason. There's so many top names that are out there. What the Mets wanted at the deadline for Jacob deGrom and the Orioles Manny Machado deal that never quite happened. So whenever we're ready, John, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to the show. We got two really gutsy reporters on here, John Lemire and, of course, Andy Slater, who covers the Marlins. So I'm very excited to see both of our guests.
What's your relationship with Lemire? How do you know each other?
Well, I know his brother. We work together at Sports Illustrated. I don't know him. I do watch Morning Joe. It's one of my favorite shows, so I see him on in the morning every day, but I have never met him, never spoken. But I'm anxious to see. I know he's a huge, huge Red Sox fan. It seems like everybody on that show is a big Red Sox fan for whatever reason, just coincidence. Mike Barnicle, we had big fan, obviously, and Joe Scarborough himself. He's from Alabama, but in Alabama they don't have a team. So normally you would think Braves, but he's a Red Sox fan too. So I don't know Jonathan Lemire, but I'm anxious to talk to him today.
Well, he is ready to join us right now on the fan line. He's a White House reporter for the Associated Press, a political analyst for MSNBC and NBC News, and as you mentioned, a lifelong Red Sox fan. I know he's super busy tonight. There's a few things going on, but thank you for taking the time to join us. First and foremost, we're going to talk politics in a sec, but Red Sox fan, how did that come about? Where are you from?
Sure thing. I'm happy to be here, first and foremost. I grew up in Massachusetts, Lowell, so north of Boston. My parents are big Red Sox fans. In fact, their first date was a Red Sox game. So it came pretty naturally. And I will say, I've had the pleasure and the misfortune of being at some pretty notable Red Sox games as a fan. I was there for Aaron Boone in 2003. In Yankee Stadium, which was with my brother, which was the longest walk of my life, getting out of that stadium after the home run. But I was also there a year later for the completion of the comeback in the Game 7 in 2004 ALCS. And yeah, I'm a Sox fan my whole life. I'm obviously thrilled with this year's team, but I am nervous about the bullpen, John.
John, you're funny. You guys are funny. I watch your show every day. You have a little bit of Red Sox in there mixed in with all of the Trump, and it's always enjoyable to listen to. I'm not sure who's more nervous, you, Barnicle, or Joe Scarborough, but why be nervous? Be happy. They've got a 100-win team. You haven't been a fan as long as Barnicle. They've been pretty good, I think, for most of your life, and really good for the last 15 years. Why are Red Sox fans so nervous all the time? You got the best team. Be happy.
Well, I think it's sort of in our DNA, and it's true. I have not been around as long as Mike, but don't tell him I said that. But
few of us have. Not even I have.
Yeah, that's true. I remember '86. That's one of my sort of first sort of sports memories. Obviously there were playoff disappointments in the years that followed against the A's. The Nomar teams never quite made it. And then, of course, the Yankees in 99 and 2003. So we're still getting used to the idea of being the successful team. And certainly the other Boston teams have as well. And perhaps not every Boston fan has handled the success that as well as they should have. But yeah, it is. I was certainly on Morning Joe. We have an odd little cabal of Red Sox fans, despite being a show that broadcasts out of New York City or Washington every day. And, Joe Barnicle actually is, I think, more confident than we are. But Joe and I are nervous, and he has turned it into sort of a running gag on the show about how nervous we are. But I will say, look, this is a great team. I mean, J.D. Martinez was exactly the right offseason acquisition. He and Mookie have both had MVP-type seasons. I'm very pleased. And, of course, I think every team in the American League at least has some sort of flaw. But yes, I'm nervous a little bit about Sale's health. I think that's fair. Price's postseason track record has not been great. And outside of Kimbrel, I don't fully trust the pen. But yes, obviously I'll take my chances. 100 wins. They should have home field throughout. We're excited.
I think it's just ingrained in Boston fans to just always expect the best. And if anything ever falls short of that, it's just never good enough. I don't know. That's the vibe I got when I was there. So,
well, we've certainly had a very good 15 or 20 years between the Pats and then the Sox and the Celtics and Bruins of each one too. So we're very fortunate.
How many wins are you expecting this year for the Red Sox? Do you think they're going to finish out strong?
I would hope so. I mean, I would like to think that they could win another. They've got 100 wins now. I'm hoping another, maybe 10, 12. I don't know. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. I'm more concerned about seeding. Get everyone healthy for the playoffs and be ready for October.
I like hearing your litany of concerns. You certainly had a nice rundown there, very comprehensive. Which is your biggest concern, and which is the team that you're really worried about? The Yankees seem to be fading a little bit lately. They're struggling. They may not even get past Oakland. They may have to fly all the way to the West Coast for that wild card game. But which team are you concerned about? And between Sale, the bullpen, and all the other things, what's your real worry?
Well, I mean, I think inherently as a New England fan, the Yankees will always be the team I'm worried about. So let's just put that out there. Like, that's not going to change. But yes, I recognize that they are sort of scuffling their way into the playoffs. They've got concerns with their pitching. I don't know if Judge is going to be back, or if he is back, he's not going to probably be his full self. I mean, I think the team that in the American League, if I look at it objectively and not just by my paranoid Yankee, it would be the Astros. I mean, I think that they're still the defending champs. I mean, they just took 2 out of 3 from the Sox this weekend at Fenway. That lineup is terrifying. They handled us last year in the playoffs. They have bullpen issues too, but they also have these starters who, as you know, are going to move back to the pen probably come playoff time. They're the team that I'm most concerned about. I'd be glad that this time around we'd have home field, but they're really, really good.
You named a couple big Red Sox moments that you were a part of, but is there one memory in particular when it comes to the Sox that sticks out the most in your mind as your most favorite?
I mean, nothing will top 2004. I mean, the 2007 title was great because that was, I think, probably start to finish the single best Red Sox team I've ever watched. 13 and what it meant to the city and the region after the marathon bombing obviously was remarkable. But I mean, for 04 to finally win after 86 years, and not just to do it, but how they did it, to come back from 3-0. It's a story that it became, as hard as 2003 was, it became the first act of this sort of 2-act play, 03 and 04. And 04 became that much sweeter because of how tragic 2003 was. And to be at Yankee Stadium when they completed that comeback, although I didn't let myself relax until literally the last out, even though the final score was 10-3, and to be there. And I will say, the Yankees organization was very classy. They let Red Sox fans hang out in the stadium for a few hours afterwards. A lot of local fans. There's a big Dominican neighborhood there and across the river in Washington Heights, and a lot of Dominican fans that adopted the Red Sox because of Manny and Pedro and Papi. To have them join the celebrations outside the stadium, that's a night that I will never ever forget. In some ways, almost sweeter than the World Series win a week later. Although I'm not giving that one back either.
Yeah.
I don't think you're old enough to remember Yaz, really. So who's your favorite Red Sox player of all time? I had some fantastic ones, obviously, between Nomar, Pedro, a lot of great ones. Mookie's going to be a great one, obviously. You have one that you really love?
It's changed a little bit. As a kid, Wade Boggs was my guy first. I mean, probably my favorite player of all time, though, was Nomar. He sort of was their best player as I was, like, really embracing my super fandom. But it's, David Ortiz is also a very special player and special guy. I have a now 7-year-old who's already a huge sports fan, a huge Red Sox fan. And like, he met Papi once, and Papi's going to be his guy forever. He and his brother now are on Team Mookie, which makes sense. And I hope Mookie's a Red Sox for a really long time. They'll have to address that in a couple off seasons. But yeah, I mean, Ortiz is I guess these days would be the guy that I would say means the most to me and the kids. Ortiz
is a special, special guy. That's for sure. To switch things over a little bit, I don't know if you saw Alex Cora's comments today on President Trump and the Puerto Rico situation. He spoke at length today about the fact that he said the country really suffered kind of fighting back at what Trump tweeted out earlier. So what's your take on that whole situation, and also having athletes and managers and coaches get involved politically?
Well, we've seen it a lot in the NBA, right? Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr have been very outspoken in their criticism of the president. We've seen certainly there's the ongoing debate about the national anthem in the NFL. In my reporting for the AP, the president certainly is eager to stoke those flames. That's an issue he thinks is a winner for him. You'll be hearing from him again about this between now and the midterms. But it's a little bit different to have a baseball player step up. We have not seen as much of that from the MLB. Mm-hmm. I don't blame Cora for saying that. I mean, the president's tweets this today were factually incorrect. He is basing it off. I was in the White House all day today, and his aides, well, they're somewhat baffled by them, but they suggest that perhaps it was born out of the relatively low death total when he visited for the first time in 2 weeks, and he has refused to sort of adjust that. And it is, as he tweeted, he's blaming Democrats, he's blaming the media for making too much of it. But it's not helpful, I think, to really anyone, but particularly to those who are still suffering in Puerto Rico. There's the power is still out in some places. There's thousands of people are dead, and to have him sort of seemingly belittle what is the hardest moment of a lot of people's lives, in order to make himself look better, to score some political points. That's hard. That's hard for some to take. And I think Cora sort of expressed a frustration for that. And of course, now I think there were a lot of people close to the White House, people allies of the president who we talked to today, who are frustrated that he's choosing this moment to relitigate that storm when obviously we have another one, right now impacting the United States.
Yeah, you do a fantastic job with the reporting and with the broadcasting. You really brought it all together. As somebody who watches Morning Joe every single morning, I think your most memorable moment. I think a great trait for a reporter is to have courage, and you really showed your courage. You didn't even look nervous. I'm going to have to ask you what it was like to stand up there and say, with the whole world watching, and I think those were your words, to President Trump. Do you believe the FBI or do you believe Putin? And Putin's standing right there. You're there. I mean, I think it was just a fantastic moment for TV and for you. What was that like for you?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope certainly it was a moment where sort of the art journalism in the media has been under attack the last couple of years, yeah. Including by the occupant of the Oval Office. So it was nice to sort of have a moment to sort of stand up for and to show the power of asking like an important question in an important moment. And look, I certainly was nervous, and when I asked Vladimir Putin about whether or not he had, the Russian government had any sort of compromising materials on President Trump or his family, and he proceeded to just not break eye contact and stare me down the entire time as he asked that question. That's a little bit, disquieting perhaps, and I was not too unhappy to get on the plane out of Finland later that night. But thank you. I mean, I think in that setting, this is a question that has shadowed this president since he took office, since before he took office. What sort of relationship does he have with Russia? Why does he seem so reluctant to believe the conclusions of every U.S. intelligence agency? Why in that moment did he seem to give Vladimir Putin the benefit of the doubt? And I think he just at that, I wanted to, right there, give him a chance to set the record straight. And he could have taken that moment and said, look, I believe my own government agencies. I want to reprimand Russia for what they did. I want to warn them to never do it again. And he didn't. And I think that was a telling moment. And this is a president who, like him or not, and certainly he has his base of really faithful supporters, he has shown an unbelievable ability to shake off scandal, right? Controversies that would have sunken any other politician. For him, he has 3 by noon and they're gone. But there are a few things that I think have stuck and that he will be judged on or remembered for. And I think his response to Charlottesville is one. I think the families being separated at the border last couple months, I think, is another. And this. And I think, what happened in Helsinki is something else that he's going to, that will be in that opening paragraph or two of his political obituary.
Yeah, I like your use of the word compromising there when you talk to Putin. Were you thinking specifically of a P tape there? And what do you think? What do you think about
that we don't know that exists or not, but yes, okay. The dossier, the Steele dossier, is widely known. It's been disseminated. Certainly there are rumors about that, but also rumors about whether it's financial propriety or anything with perhaps his children or the Trump organization. So there are a lot of things there, and I think you'll note that Putin didn't actually say no. I mean, his answer was more about just how tricky. He didn't know that Trump was in town, and how tricky it would be to gather compromat, to use the Russian phrase, of every, prominent American businessman who was in Russia. So he kind of gave an answer that way without ever actually saying, no, I don't have anything on Donald Trump.
Yeah, very mature answer to my very lowbrow question. So good job.
Well, I work at the Associated Press, so I have to play it right down the middle.
Okay.
How do you prepare yourself for those moments when you know that this is going to be seen by millions of people and it's a question that is controversial? What goes through your mind before you're about to get up and speak?
Well, I will say that, we don't, in those kind of settings, in those presidential press conferences, you don't know you're going to get called upon. So I didn't know until Sarah Sanders said my name. I had certainly been lobbying for a question. I had been prepared, because you never want to be caught off guard. You don't want to be the one who doesn't have a question ready when they do call your name. And in that scenario, I just felt like in that moment, with President Trump standing just 10 feet away from President Putin, and with this question, about his relationship with Russia hanging over his administration, I feel like this was the moment to ask this. There was nothing else to ask in some ways. And my colleague from Reuters, who had the first question, was very good as well. And he's the one who got Vladimir Putin to say that, yes, Russia was rooting for Trump to win. And, and I felt like what I wanted to ask about who he believed was sort of the natural follow-up. And I certainly was nervous, but I was glad to do it. I'm sure many of my colleagues would have done it in my stead. But I'm glad, obviously, it worked out the way it did.
Many, but not all. So you do get the credit. You were able to do it. So congratulations for that. That was huge. So I want to ask you, while we have you, I think the midterm elections, I watch your show a lot. So I think we're looking probably the Democrats doing well at this point, which is not atypical. I think the other side does well oftentimes 2 years in. But what do you think? We have an interesting president. Do you think he lasts this term? Do you think he wins a second term? What do you think the result of all this is?
Well, making predictions about Donald Trump is a fool's game, I will say. Although I will say I covered his campaign in 2016, and I was one of the few voices in the reporters on the plane who said, hey, this guy, he could win. I think that, yes, first of all, you're right that presidents often lose seats during the midterm election. So that's not unusual, even as unusual as he is. I think that certainly people expect the Democrats to take the House. I think most people do think the Republicans will hold on to the Senate, though. The map in the Senate is just very tricky for the Democrats. But, if the Democrats do take the House, even if it's just the one, two things happen. First of all, you'll hear the impeachment talk, even though I don't think that would go anywhere. I mean, he may even be impeached, but he's not going to be removed. The 2/3 of the Senate, a Republican-controlled Senate, are not going to remove Donald Trump. But there will be an effort there. Certainly there'll be energy on the left to do that, even if it's just a statement, even if it won't lead to him leaving office. But more than that, I do think, I will add, some Democrats think that will backfire. Let's remember, Bill Clinton only got more popular after he was impeached back in 1998. But I think what Democrats will do is use the power of subpoena that now they'll control a House, they'll control one of the houses of Congress, and just have investigation after investigation and haul up everyone who's ever worked for Donald Trump, not just to ask about Russia, but to ask about corruption or ask about the Emoluments Clause or anything else. So I think it's a very uncomfortable reality for the Republicans and Donald Trump. So you're going to see him. He said he's going to be on the road constantly between now and November. He is still publicly optimistic, but I can certainly, behind closed doors, the people around the president are very nervous. They do think they'll keep the Senate, but the House at this point feels like a long shot.
You mentioned the national anthem debate and everything that's going on in the NFL and Trump's stance on that. Do you think there's an end game for that situation? And if so, what do you think will come from it?
Well, I think that the NFL has certainly not done the best job in handling it, and they seem to every move they make seems to just make the controversy worse. It'll be interesting to see, will it sort of lose steam? Will his supporters eventually just sort of tire of this issue? It's possible. He doesn't think so. We've seen him tweet about it a few times already. It's obviously only been 1 week of the season so far. We know that he has told people around him that he thinks it's a good issue. He thinks that it's one that his supporters really believe in. Certainly we've seen him go after Nike after the Colin Kaepernick ad. I mean, right now though, I think that it's a calculation that he is making that there aren't a lot of policy stuff that he can really point to. I mean, I think that the tax cut, sure, the economy is doing well, although, and he's certainly trying to take as much credit as he can for that. But he feels most comfortable sort of playing in the cultural battlefields, and I think that things like this, whether it's something like Roseanne or something like the national anthem, that's where he wants to play. He feels like that's where his supporters are really with him. But it also points to, frankly, just the lack of other accomplishments this White House can point to.
Let's see how nervous a Red Sox fan you are. One last baseball question. What's your World Series prediction?
Oh, geez.
Who's in it? Who wins it?
Look, I'll put on my home team hat. I will say I'll take the Sox, even though, I don't feel great about it. Give me let's go Red Sox. Hey, World Series that we've wanted for a while, even though I know they've scuffled a little bit against the Brewers this past weekend. But give me Red Sox Cubs. I think that would be a lot of fun. Good. I think that those two ballparks would be great. The Theo storyline would be fun. Oh, yeah. I still miss him. Give me that pick. And I think that would just be a great sport. That would be a great end to a season, which I know has not been necessarily the best MLB season. There's not a lot of parity. We have some teams really tanking, home run, the pace of play issues, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I've enjoyed the season.
I'm sure you have.
But I think that would be a very fun finish. Red Sox Cubs would be great.
I would like to watch that. Before we let you go, I wanted to share with you my 2013 Red Sox World Series ring. Thought you would appreciate it.
Yes, I do very much. That is fantastic. Congratulations.
I wear this all the time. I just walk around shaking hands with it. So
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have an incredibly busy night ahead of you. So good luck with that all. We'll be watching, and you'll have to join us on Inside Baseball sometime in the future.
I'd be happy to. Would love to come back.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Say hi to your brother.
I will. Thank you again.
Awesome guy. Knows his
Terrific guy. First time I've talked to him, his brother, same thing, Joe Lemire, who covers sports. I worked with him at Sports Illustrated, also a terrific guy.
Good people. Now, I know we're going to get Andy Slater on shortly. So, or we can get him on right now. We're just back to back.
There we go. That's the way to do it. I think he's got a plane to catch, so.
I did see him tweet out that he was at the airport. So, Andy Slater, whenever you are ready to join us here on the fan line, we are ready to.
There he is.
Here I am. No Trump questions tonight, okay?
We'll stay.
You can handle it, Andy.
Yeah.
How you guys doing?
We're great. You have been through a pretty crazy year. So if you want to take us on a little tour of what exactly happened after that British Virgin Islands trip, just take us through the sequence of events.
Well, first, I'm glad I actually made it to the British Virgin Islands because it was the first time I ever went on a small plane in my entire life. And there was only one pilot. There was no co-pilot. So I had to worry about the plane and the pilot's health. But after finally landing there, I went to where the Marlins had said, because the Miami Herald had reported that one of the owners of the Miami Marlins and the ownership group had a business. His principal place of business was in the British Virgin Islands. So I went ahead and requested documents, and the address that I found was actually a P.O. box in the British Virgin Islands. So I went ahead and put that report out there that, hey, this address that lists this principal place of business for one of the owners in their group, it's actually a post office box. And the Marlins obviously weren't happy with that. And I had applied for a credential before that trip. And while I was still there in the British Virgin Islands, like an hour later, I got an email saying my credential that was approved was already denied. So they weren't happy with that story. And a lot of this still has to do from Loria's ownership group. And a lot of people would say it's not fair to include Jeter's ownership group in this. And I think I would agree with that. A lot of people would agree with that. But this went to federal court, and in federal court, in these documents in front of a judge, they said, hey, well, we're not a citizen of the U.S. Miami. We're a citizen of the British Virgin Islands. And actually what wound up happening about a month and a half ago, because this has been ongoing litigation in federal court, they went back to the judge and said, well, wait a minute, we may not be in the British Virgin Islands. Actually, the principal place of business and the decision-making is in Panama. Now, would that have happened if I didn't have that video there and found a post office box in the British Virgin Islands? I don't know. But what I do know is that they changed it in court and said, okay, well, now it's actually in Panama. And just recently, the federal judge said, look, we're not dealing with this. We're going to send you back to county court.
You know, we just had Jonathan Lemire on, as you probably heard at the end there, and I gave him credit for having a courage. And I think that's a very important trait for a reporter. And he stood up and asked tough questions of Donald Trump in front of Putin, and he asked a very tough question of Putin, which I think a lot of people probably wouldn't love to do. And I give you credit because you acted independently. So many of us work for MLB or MLB.com or the Marlins or whatever. You acted independently. You went down there. You found out some information, and obviously the team didn't love it. Tell us what the aftermath was and what your conclusions were, because you had a great job, and I live in Miami. You're fantastic on the radio. I thought you were on 940, I believe, and I thought you did a great job. And what happened to you exactly after your trip and your coverage, and what do you take from it?
Well, let me say, I treated this situation, treat any other situation. Now, normally, I don't have to get on a plane and go to another country. And I even met with the vice president of communications with the Marlins after all of this. And he said to me in the meeting, you know, who would go to another country to go investigate something? Like, would you do that for any other team? And I said, well, no other team here in South Florida is claiming that they're a citizen of other countries. So, I mean, if like another team did that, I would do the same thing. But I go throughout South Florida. I'll really go anywhere to get that story. But going back to your question, from what I was told, there were a lot of complaints throughout the entire year. My station that I was working for, they're the flagship of the Miami Marlins. So all of their games are heard there on the same station that I hosted a show on. And I was told that day after day and week after week and month after month, we're getting phone calls about, oh, you know, Slater's putting out this story or Slater's saying this on the radio. And I can understand from the station standpoint, they're getting tired of those phone calls. I was told by my
Did we lose him?
Am I still here?
Yeah, there you are. You told the former boss.
Well, maybe with this feed too. I have no idea what's going on. But my old bosses kept saying, look, we don't want to deal with any of this complaining anymore. You know, understand that we're the flagship of the Marlins. As long as what you're reporting is factual and all that, you know, we've got your back. So then I wound up putting out another story. This had to do with Marlins Man. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Marlins Man bought 300 seats, and he wants to give away 300 seats to a game this coming Monday. And he bought them from the Marlins, paid for them with his own money. He was going to buy them food and everything. So I put it out there on my site. I got a phone call. It was about 4 p.m. that Saturday, and it was from one of the bosses saying, hey, you decided to go. And I, huh? Later, I spoke with my old boss again, and she had said that she was there at the ballpark, and the Marlins came up to her complaining about this article, how I'm giving away tickets, and they don't want this and that. And I actually spoke to the VP of Communications about 3 or 4 days. And, you know, to be fair, he said that he never complained. I told him that my old bosses said that he did complain. And, you know, I don't think that anyone with the Marlins ever said to any of my old bosses, hey, we don't want him on your station anymore. I don't believe that. But as far as the complaining went, I certainly believe a lot of complaining went on from what I was told over and over and over by multiple people. So the 940 and I, we.
Are you there?
Did we lose you?
We might have lost him. I will interject there that I did hear, and I wish he was on to hear this, and I told him I was going to say it, but I did hear from the VP of the Marlins when I tweeted out the promotion for the show that Andy Slater was going to be on and that he fought the Marlins. Jason Latimer, the VP of the Marlins, let me know that he did not specifically ask that Andy Slater be fired. So I'm going to take him at his word for that. He seems to be a reasonable fellow. although I personally don't think Andy Slater did anything wrong, and I don't think there was any reason to call. Maybe the Marlins don't call it complaining, but apparently he did call. I don't know how many times. And I will say that whoever runs that radio station, to me, that's just not professional. That's not journalism. That is pathetic. I remember when I covered the L.A. Raiders. I'm going back to the 80s here. But Al Davis used to call and complain about Mark Heisler constantly and wanted him off the beat because he had some tough criticisms of the Raiders. And the L.A. Times just listened politely, I'm sure, and hung up on Al Davis. That's what a media outlet should do. I understand this media outlet runs the Marlins games, and maybe they were concerned because they have the Marlins game on, but to me that's not professional. That's pathetic. That's a sad state of affairs for that radio station. I mean, Jason Latimer might be just doing his job, calling them to let them know they wasn't thrilled with it. He may have had no expectation that they would fire Andy Slater. I don't know, but that was the result of it, and it was really unfair. And it's unfair to us in Miami because he has a great show. He's doing a podcast now, which I'm sure is terrific. I haven't heard it yet, but it just was not the right result for a guy who was really just doing his job and doing it well.
And Andy,
I appreciate I appreciate those words.
So what is your relationship with the Marlins like now?
Well, I've said, and I even told Jason Latimer when he called me today, their vice president of communications, we just started going to a back and forth. And I said, look, I'm ready to get over this thing. Like, I have no problem with any other team in South Florida. All their PR guys reached out to me after they heard about this. And I never had a problem with the Marlins at all until this new ownership group took over. And I said, I'm ready to move forward with all of this. Like, just put it behind us. Whatever happened, happened. I applied for a credential actually for next week, for Tuesday. And he told me, well, we'll have to get back to you. I still have some reservations about that. I'm like, what reservations do you have about it? And then he just kept going back and forth. And I said, you know what, I'm not getting into this whole back and forth anymore. You're going to do what you want to do what you want to do. I'm going to get my scoops with or without access regardless. So we'll see what happens.
I think you have the right attitude. That's all you can do. Plugging along. While we have you, what do you think about the Marlins plan? Obviously, they look like they were in terms of the effort for a long time. The record is going to be not good, but they're not the worst team in baseball. They've made a lot of trades. I don't know how many years do you think they'll be for a winning team?
I think a lot of people, they just want to draw a conclusion already, like, oh, is Jesus' plan working? It could work. It's hard to tell if it works. Like, why does anybody have to say it's working now? We're not going to know if it's working now. Maybe in about 2, 3, 4 years, we'll know if it's working, if prospects actually turn out to do something. One of the big trades is Christian Yelich. I mean, unbelievable season with Milwaukee. Lewis Brinson, he came back in September. He was doing okay, but how much does September really count? So we're really not going to know for another 2 years. I hope it's going to work out. I mean, I'm a South Florida guy. I want all Miami teams to win. And I'll hope that the Marlins join that club of Miami teams. Maybe they'll start to do what they did before. 97, 2003, win a World Series, and don't get rid of the team.
Andy, before we let you go, we know you have a flight to catch. The big question that I think a lot of people have, who exactly is Marlins man? Who is this guy? Where does he come from? How does he have all the money to do all the things he does?
I'd like to know the answer myself, and I'm there.
Ask the Marlins. They love him.
I'm sure.
Actually, no, I don't think they do. But Marlins man, he's been doing this for a long, long time. I found footage where he was at the World Series in 2003 in New York, just in the tee, and he was never pointed out because he wasn't wearing the orange. But when the Marlins went to an orange color, which they're not wearing anymore, then you can see him right behind home plate. But he's a guy who's a very successful lawyer, a worker and he's got a lot of money, and he loves to enjoy the game. And as you know, he goes to all these games, sits in the front row, and enjoys life and enjoys paying it forward. A lot of people think, okay, well, he's about attention, and obviously he's going to get a lot of attention. But he gives away so many tickets. He brings people to so many games. And it's just unbelievable how he pays it forward. Donations, firefighters, law enforcement officers, all the first responders. You're going to have a lot of people out there that are just watching sports on TV that can be spot, and they can't be. So obviously, like Taylor Swift said, it's going to hate.
Perfect way to end that. You think the Marlins would be happy that he's there supporting the team, taking up a seat, but hey, just my opinion. I don't know.
You would think so. They turned down $200,000. So I guess they don't want his money.
Crazy. Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have a safe flight tonight. Where are you heading?
Thank you. I'm actually only headed to Orlando. I could have driven there, but I guess I just like planes better.
All
And
right.
this one has two pilots.
I thought he was going back to the Virgin Islands.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. We'll get you on Inside Baseball again sometime in the future.
See you, Andy.
And he might have froze right there. So we'll take care of that. So I just feel like that was – you perfectly summed it up earlier, but just a man that was doing his job and kind of got screwed for it.
That's the way I look at it. I mean, he's always been very professional, very likable guy. He gets along with everybody. I can see how Marlins fan, it seems on the surface like the same publicity of the team it is. I can see how he can get under the skin a little bit. There's a little bit of an attention, if you know what I mean. But Andy Slater, terrific guy, works hard, and I think that the radio station just made a very, very bad mistake and showed their true colors there.
Well, to any fans that are watching right now, you can put on the comment section below if you have any questions for John or myself. And also, if you want to join us on the fan line, remember, if you're on the app, you just go to the upper right corner. It says fan line, and you will chat with our producer, and you can come on live and talk to John and I. But we're going to talk about free agency this offseason. So Manny Machado, Bryce Harper, both in a spot where they could challenge Stanton's record $325 million deal. I know you spoke to 18 different executives. What did you find out from them? What did you take away from those conversations?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Manny Machado actually got 12 votes that he would win the winter, and Bryce Harper got 6. I don't know whether it was the UFC or the all-around play. Machado obviously a terrific elite defender. It was a little surprising to me. Harper, younger, certainly has more power. The offensive numbers are better. Normally, the power plays big in free agency. And the other issue I think I found was that they a couple people suggested a little bit less drama with Machado. Machado is very likable, very quiet guy. I think Harper is not a negative. He may be a little brash, but he's out there. I think owners might appreciate them more than the executives that I talked to. He brings attention to the team, generally positive attention. I think he's developing into a leader. So I think it's positive. In terms of what really should be. Of course, these are 18 executives around the game. It isn't Mike Rizzo. It wasn't anybody who knows Bryce Harper. They're looking at it from a distance, and for whatever reason, he rubs a couple people the wrong way. I don't know why. I don't think I dealt with both guys. I think they're both terrific. As I said, introducing the story, I think there's 2 of the top 5 players in the game, and it's going to be an interesting post-competition. We haven't seen a position player of this ilk be a free agent since A-Rod. A-Rod obviously was a free agent back in 2007 and in 2000, and both times got record contracts. And since been eclipsed by, again, we're talking about the Marlins, Giancarlo Stanton, Yankee, but we'll see if either of them beat him, and who wins the win. It's going to be a fierce competition.
It's interesting, like you said. I think maybe just from a perspective of the job that I do, you automatically hear Harper's name much more than you hear Machado out there, and I don't know if that's just a general baseball thing, but when you look at the reasons why you think that these execs picked Machado over Harper, you look at the hitting ability, defense, intangibles, the market, injury history, agents, so something that you discussed in your article. What stands out the most when comparing the two?
Well, I mean, I 11 different factors that will determine how much money you're going to get. And obviously, hitting is at the top. I have recency. We've done well lately. At one point, it looked like Machado was having a good year, and Harper's off to a rough start. But Harper's really come on, and Machado's just been okay with the Dodgers, much better in Camden Yards. So, I think that's a factor. But right now, they're having very comparable seasons. Obviously, the defense plays. The market. That's interesting to guess. You think an infielder may have a better market, but if you look at the last several years, the outfielders have done fantastic in free agency. Hayward, Ellsbury, all got huge deals. We haven't really seen the infielders do that great. Some of them got stuck last year in free agency. I'm not sure why that is. I think a lot of contending teams have great shortstops and great third basemen. It's great that Machado can play two. That helps him. But I mean, one of the more interesting factors beyond the agent, something in itself, are the intangibles. I mean, who do you like? Does the fame matter? As you said, Bryce Harper is more famous than Manny Machado, good or bad. For me, the owners are going to look at that as a positive. I think I talked to all the executives, and they didn't look at it as a positive. Some of them even said he's done too many commercials. LeBron James, Steph Curry, he's done commercials around the clock, and those guys seem to play pretty well. I think it's definitely a positive if you pay attention to the game. I think the executives are going to be wrong about that part of it.
Something we've been talking about really all season long on Inside Baseball was Mike Trout and his marketability and if he's out there enough. And because he's not the Bryce Harper doing a million commercials, do you think that Trout could sign a lifetime extension that trumps anything that Machado and Harper might even touch?
Yeah, there's something else I wrote about as well this week. I think that Mike Trout is likely to what these two get. He's not going to want to sell Harper get more or Machado get more. Now, of course, they have the advantage of being a free agent, perhaps 2 years away. But I think everybody, including Harper, I don't know if Machado's saying anything about it, but Harper is out there, and he has conceded that Mike Trout is the best player in the game, and he should be the highest paid. So I think he'll probably wait. We see what these two get together. We know the Wizards last longer than ever, so we may see a Trout deal in March. I know he's concerned about winning. They haven't won. They've been in the playoffs for 4 years. They've only been in the playoffs one time in the 7 years he's been there. It's definitely a concern for him, but he's a guy who's a loyal guy and loves it. I think in LA, he's a weather fan. There's no weather in LA or Anaheim or There's no weather at all. For years. There wasn't a rain out there for years. I don't think they've ever had a rain out. Maybe he wants to go with his rain and he can hang out with our friends. I don't know, but I think he's loyal, and I think would be willing to stay if they give him the right offer.
Moving on, you reported today an interesting little tidbit about Jacob deGrom and what they wanted for him at the deadline. Can you give us a little bit more detail about what you found out?
Yeah, the Mets basically targeted five teams that have great prospects, including prominently the Blue Jays, the Braves, the Padres, the Yankees, and maybe to a little bit less degree the Brewers. Really interested in Jacob deGrom as a lot of teams. But those are the teams that are big-time young players. Now, the Yankees went out and moved up Slater Torres, as Frank Hanky said on the record. I can imagine that the Padres were not as about Fernando Tatis Jr. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. wasn't going anywhere. Probably neither was Bo Bichette. I think Atlanta was going to be. They got a million prospects, but for the Mets to trade into Atlanta, I just don't see how they would have done that. They may have gone to Atlanta to see what they could get and what they should be able to get. Help out their dealings with Toronto and the other teams, but I don't believe they would trade him. I don't really think they would trade him to the Yankees either, but they did talk. So they were looking for those kind of players. That person told me, once you start taking prospects off the table, we can't have a deal because Jacob deGrom is the best pitcher in the game right now, and he's probably a young winner.
Do you think the Mets were right to hold on to all their starters?
At the time, I said it's Great Syndergaard. He's very talented. He's got 3 years to go, but he can't have that reliability factor that I would look for, and I know they get a ton for him. And I thought maybe Zach Wheeler, he's only got 1 more year to go, and he's been kind of up and down. But since the trade did not happen, Wheeler's been fantastic. So whether the three-headed monster that's Jimmy for the Mets is doing a great job, or couldn't agree on a trade, or was organized. Give him credit. Wheeler, they've done the right thing. I think GM that comes in, whoever look at it and say they do have a great strength here. They've got 4 really good starting pitchers. They got a lot of work to do. As we know, their offense is terrible, their defense is worse, and their bullpen is basically non-existent. Lugo and development. So a lot of work to do. But in the end, I think they did the right thing.
Well, thank you so much, John. We had some awesome guests here this week on Inside Baseball, and be sure to catch us next week, 8 p.m., same place, same time. Join us, ask some questions. You can join us on the fan line like we had the awesome guests here today. And, John, I hope you have a great week.
You too, Jenny.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.